I've done one case where the person knew they were being filmed, and it was a consensual video that was made between partners and then later disclosed. Majority of my cases, they either don't know that they've been filmed, or it's been a landlord that has installed secret cameras throughout the
Oh.
property.
Now, the phrase revenge porn was all over the news last week after Stephen Bear was jailed for 21 months for sharing a video of him having sex with his ex-girlfriend Georgia Harrison on the website OnlyFans. But is it a term, revenge porn, that we should stop using? The barrister Grace Gwynne thinks it is because it implies the victim is somehow to blame. Grace joins us now. Morning, Grace.
Good morning.
Just explain your concerns with the term revenge porn. And I suppose one of the things to mention here is it has become a kind of a colloquialism, hasn't it, for an offence which does have more sort of official names, if you like.
Yes, it is a colloquialism. And I think the concern that we should all have about that is that it's become socially used and widely acceptable to use the term revenge porn. It's the only offence in this country that we ever associate the word revenge to. And it tends to be a gender-based crime, with the majority of victims being female. And I think it's really concerning that we use that term because it does imply that the victim has a part to play in the role of the perpetrator, and that's quite simply not the case.
It is also called non-consensual pornography or image-based sexual abuse. It was made illegal in 2015. Why do you think, with an offence like this, why do you think there is an element of colloquial references being used and almost a shorthand, I suppose?
I think the first reason is that it's a trigger word. It catches the reader's eye, whether it's in a tabloid or a publication, and it's like a snowball effect. It's just grown and become this unstoppable beast. And I also have an issue with the phrase non-consensual pornography, because if you look at victims that don't know they're being recorded or don't know these photos and videos are being taken, then how on earth can it be called pornography? So I think in the first instance, the word revenge needs to go. And in the second instance, we really need to analyse the word pornography, and it be on a case-by-case basis. But the scary reality is that it's more widely recognised as the phrase revenge porn than it is by the actual statute and the actual offence itself.
Do you, in your experience perhaps with those victims that you may have worked with or come across, does the terminology cause pain and difficulty for them?
Absolutely. When I was prosecuting a few years ago, it was definitely a bone of contention for those that were complainants of this crime. You know, there is such a stigma being attached, and often their reputation and lives have been ruined already by the offence, whether that's they've lost employment or they've lost their reputation in the community. And then when we get to court and then there is a successful conviction and they've been believed by the court of this country, we then refer to the crime as revenge porn. It then takes them back to square one. So yes, there's definitely a widespread pain, not just by the victims, but the families of the victims as well. And it almost exonerates the perpetrators that even with a conviction, the title revenge means that it was almost a justified act, or that, you know, that they shouldn't be wholly to blame for what they've done.
It's a really interesting thought, actually. It's a really interesting sort of challenge to the language we use around these things. You mentioned it's the only sort of offence that's referred to with the word revenge. Have there been other examples of offences that have, I don't know what the correct thing, but had the terminology changed? I was to try and soften the language and to try and sort of firm up exactly what it means, I suppose, in that way.
No is the short answer. That it's just been accepted, and I don't think people really analyse it. It's just it stands as the title revenge porn, and people just use it free-willingly. When actually, when you really do dissect the title, it's quite appalling. I mean, in circumstances where someone kills someone because they've harmed their family, you wouldn't call it revenge murder. So why on earth are we calling this revenge porn when the cases that I personally have had involvement in is usually when an intimate relationship has broken down and it is a bitter person that does it to harm the other person. So the problem is that these sorts of offences are born usually out of very close, intimate relationships.
What is appropriate terminology to use in this, with all of this in mind?
I would use image-based abuse, internet-based crime, non-consensual disclosure. You know, it's those kind of more clinical words that takes all emotion out of the name of the offence, because the victim, the complainant, is already going through huge amounts of emotion in order to secure this conviction, that they don't deserve to then be titled with potentially reference to being a porn star, or that they've had a part to play in all of this. So more clinical, non-consensual disclosure, image-based abuse, internet-based crimes, those sort of terminology.
Yeah, and in sort of legal definitions, do they all mean the same thing? Is there any sort of ambiguity about how the crime is defined under those sorts of words that you've just used?
Internet-based crime, there'd be ambiguity, because that could be anything.
Yeah.
We now live in a cyber world. So non-consensual disclosure, it's basically the word of the statute. The statute is written because it is what it says on the tin.
Yeah.
So let's stick to that phraseology and let's not sort of jazz it up for tabloids or headlines or punchlines.
Grace, can I just ask you a question? It's Chloe here. How many in the cases that you've been involved in are, has filming been carried out with the knowledge and consent at the time of the female involved, and then later on, obviously, the other party has released it? And how many times is that done in secret?
I think from memory, I've done one case where the person knew they were being filmed, and it was a consensual video that was made between partners and then later disclosed. Majority of my cases, they either don't know that they've been filmed, or it's been a landlord that has installed secret cameras throughout the property. So it's not even been an intimate relationship at all.
My word.
Good grief. Wow. Okay, well, on that slightly startling note, Grace, thank you for your insight and your expertise. It's really interesting to speak to you. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks very much. That's Grace Gwynne, who's a family and personal injury barrister now at number 5 Barristers Chambers. Gosh, that is such an intriguing, thought-provoking
I mean, I
conversation.
assumed it would probably be kind of 50-50 or something like that. But for the majority of these cases to be filmed in secret and by a landlord.
Yeah. I suppose I'd also perhaps considered the idea that perhaps people share images with their partners or videos or whatever, and then down the line they are then released. But actually, for Grace to break it down in that way it's caught me off guard, I have to say.
I mean, clearly we don't know the numbers because that's just people who have gone to Grace, but really fascinating insight on that.
Thank you so much for watching. You get extra points for making it all the way to the end of the video.
And if you want to see more from me, Chloe and Callum, you can join us every Friday to Sunday on Times Radio from 6 a.m.